Can you hear me?
Perfect, Guy. I can hear you. I'm just putting the stream up on YouTube. So just bear with me 1 second.
Then I think everything is ready. Thank you.
Okay, we're ready, rocking and rolling on YouTube as well. So welcome back, everybody. I hope you had a nice break. I did. So I'd like to introduce you to Guy Seehee, and Guy and I know each other a long time. Guy, would you mind? Oh, actually, I can just read this. I don't need to stop you from sharing. So I'll just read your bio. A little bit about Guy. So first of all, Guy is his workshop is called Toefl Vocab Secrets Revealed. So corpus analysis of Toefl test reveals that 1/3 of the words occurring in all parts of every Toefl test are not commonly used words in authentic general English. And it's essential that students have automatic recall for the 993 words that covered 90% of all Toefl tests. We're talking about such words as aboard, absent, gallon, and garbage. These are lower frequency words in authentic general English, but they are very high frequency words on all Toefl tests. Come and find out how you can help your students quickly learn and retain all of the most important high frequency vocab for Toefl. Now, so that's a little bit about the workshop. I just want to talk about Guy himself. So I hope I have your bio here. No, sorry, I clicked on your YouTube video. I don't actually have your bio, Guy, up on the site for some reason. Would you be so kind as to give us a quick introduction? You're on mute, Guy.
That'll help. Thank you. I'm Guy Seehee. I'm originally from New York, and I have lived in Japan, in Tokyo, for the last 37 years. I suppose you could say I'm an entrepreneur mostly. I've been involved in a number of different companies. Many of them were startups. Some were private equity buyouts where we took a company and then grew it up and made it bigger. And I've been doing this quite a long time. I've had a lot of experience talking to ETS people, that's the maker of Toefl and TOEIC, out of curiosity to learn more about how they score their tests and how they write them. And I've always kind of been on the fringe of education business. I've owned a university in Australia. It has over 10,000 students now. I sold that a few years back. Yeah, people actually own universities. I know, it's weird. If you're interested, you can look at my LinkedIn page. I've got a son who's on Broadway right now. He's performing in a show on Broadway, and another daughter who's an actor in New York City, and an artist, and another artist in school in London right now. So my life's pretty happy and full. And I'm happy to be with you today. And I hope this information is interesting for some of you. I hope there are some students online as well. So if you have any questions about my presentation or me, please ask me after the slides. They won't take very long. Is that okay? Phil, can I roll right on then?
Perfect. Take it away.
All right. Well, as I said, I'm Guy Seehee, and this is Toefl Vocabulary Secrets Revealed. So I have 3 secrets and some advice to share. Secret number 1, other than the speaking component, Toefl is not designed to score your English ability. Toefl is a comparison test. It measures you against the other test takers. That means the Toefl questions are not used to measure grammar and vocabulary ability. The questions are used to measure you to the other test takers. Have you ever noticed that Toefl does not provide specific advice for improving your score? That's because they don't know what you should do. Your score is primarily determined by how many correct responses you give to the more difficult questions. Item response theory is what's used to determine the difficulty of each question. A person with high ability will get the easy questions and the moderate questions correct. A person of low ability will have trouble getting the difficult TOEFL questions correct. Creating easy TOEFL questions is pretty easy. Creating, that means writing and editing, difficult TOEFL questions is actually a very big challenge. People call them tricky questions because they are tricky, even for native speakers. I think maybe an example will help to explain the IRT process of establishing item difficulty. Please read the statement at the top and then give the two questions some thought. I'll pause. Okay. The first step to determine the actual statistical difficulty of these two questions is to collect responses from at least 100 different people at different levels of ability. After we collect the 100 or so responses, we're going to use a rash model to determine the item characteristic curve for each question. The item characteristic curve, or ICC, is what reveals the difficulty of the question. However, the ICC does not tell us why a question is difficult. That's what I meant about it really doesn't test the grammar or vocabulary. It simply measures how difficult the question is. So based on everyone's responses, we're going to use the rash model to plot the ICC. And we do this for each question. Then using the ICCs, we can estimate the relative ability of one person based on their responses to the questions. This is pretty complicated business. It took me hours to simplify it that much. I think we should move on. In order to generate the number of responses that are needed to establish and maintain the ICCs across multiple countries around the world, obviously, the TOEFL questions need to be repeated on many tests. That's secret number 2. 95% of the questions on every TOEFL test are repeaters. 5% are new questions put in there to collect response information. The 5% do not affect the scores. What's more, only a tiny fraction of the new questions, the 5%ers, will ever be used because the response information that most of them produce is too unstable. What that means is creating new TOEFL questions that can be used on the test is time-consuming and expensive. They hire writers and editors, they put them in the test, they fail, they spent that money and they got nothing. 2% of the questions they test make it into an actual TOEFL test. So it's quite expensive. That's why, well, for many reasons, repeating the existing questions is the best way to produce reliable TOEFL scores. And make no mistake, producing reliable test scores is TOEFL's #1 top priority. So here are 6 examples of low frequency, uncommon words that appear often in TOEFL questions. Notice that 4 of them have 2 or 3 different meanings. Uncommon words and words that have multiple meanings, like these, are often what cause a TOEFL question to be difficult. If everyone knew the uncommon meanings, then the questions would no longer be as difficult. And that brings us to secret number 3. The maker of TOEFL has never and will never issue an official vocabulary list, because if they did, it would ruin the reliability of their scoring system. Remember, difficult vocabulary, and more specifically, the particular meanings they choose to imply with their usage, is the primary vehicle or method for creating difficult questions or hinging the question around it. How can students be expected to learn all of the vocabulary words that occur on Toefl? I don't think you're going to like this, but after years of studying Toefl and discussing it with some of the senior scientists and editors, my conclusion is that a Toefl score reflects total time spent reading unsimplified materials. Students can be expected to learn all of the words that occur on Toefl by reading 11,000 hours of unsimplified materials. That's 3.5 hours a day for 8.5 years. 11,000 hours of reading based on the incidence of occurrence of low-frequency words will provide enough repetitions of low-frequency words in context to acquire recall ability for all of the words that occur on Toefl. It will also greatly increase reading speed, which is essential for scoring higher. I know what you're thinking. Did this guy just suggest that I tell my students to read 3.5 hours a day? I said that was the best way, but it's not the way I recommend. My advice is hack the Toefl with digital flashcards that you study on a mobile phone. Flashcard apps can be used to acquire comprehension of all words that occur on Toefl in a relatively short time. How short a time are we talking about? Let's have a look. At the top is a high school student who started with 565 words. You can see that from the white text in the middle of the progress bar. And then she learned 2,783 new words. You can see that from the small green text. She did that in 187 hours. Below her is a college student who also started with 565 and then learned 6,723 new words in 325 hours. I love this kid. This kid hated English. I actually talked to him his whole life. And then he got on the flashcards and he just went like a maniac. He did that in 1 year, 1 school year, his freshman year. I was hoping he would finish the whole thing, but as soon as school year ended, boom, he was gone. Both of these two started from a low level. That's why they're together on this slide. And if you do the math, you'll see that they learned 18.6 new words per hour on average. It's kind of tricky because of spaced repetition. The words repeat so many times, 6 times or more usually. And so you could have learned all the words much faster, maybe half the time, but you wouldn't have as deep memory of them. That's a whole nother story, so another presentation on that. Let's look at 2 more. These 2 both started from a higher level, above Toefl 55. I don't know if you can see it, but the Toefl score correlations are across the bottom of the progress bar. The student at the top learned 2,588 words in 122 hours. The student below learned 2,989 words in 214 hours. On average, they learned 16.6 words per hour, a little less than the lower level students. I'm not really sure why. Maybe the higher level words are easier to forget. How did they do that? And where does this data come from? Not from there. There are many vocabulary flashcard apps to choose from. These are the 2 I recommend. First is this free one called Words and Monsters. You download it from the App Store. Search Words and Monsters, and you'll find links to download the app and a link to the LMS for teachers, so you can track scores and learning progress like we saw on the previous slides. This one's called Word Engine. Search Word Engine and you'll find it. This is a premium application that's used with students at junior high, high school, and colleges. It costs about $20 per student, depending on your currency exchange. And it comes with full technical support for students and teachers, which is highly recommended when there's a large number of students. This is a scatter plot of Toefl vocabulary. If you haven't seen these before, it can be a little confusing. Each dot represents one word among the 14,760 words that make up the entire Toefl lexical universe. So we took 120 Toefl tests and scanned them, and there are 14,760 possible words that could occur on there. You don't need to learn them all because like 9,000 or so are 1% of occurrences. 7,500 or 99.5% of the occurrences. So those are the ones you really need. Words toward the left are the more frequent words, and words to the right are less frequent words. Words toward the top are high difficulty. Most people won't know them. And words toward the bottom are low difficulty. So you see, difficulty and frequency are not really correlated. Both the free game and the premium app start with an IRT test that identifies which words a student already knows. Words below the ability line are known. Words above the ability line are unknown. This is how the flashcards can focus on the words each student needs to learn for Toefl. Now, besides Toefl, there are a number of other special purpose courses, but today we're talking about Toefl. Now, I won't go into any more detail about the apps today, right now. If you just search for these apps on the homepage, there are links to videos that explain how they work and the research and technology behind them. Well, that's it. Thank you very much, and best of luck to all students. I hope some of you will try the apps. And now we have time left, so if you have any questions, I'll do my best to answer them. Seems like a pretty quiet group today. Has anyone ever tried any of these? Is everyone gone for lunch? All right, well, thank you very much, and I'll sign off then. Goodbye.
Hi, Guy. Thank you. Thank you very much for your presentation. Simon, yeah, thanks, Guy, for that. So it will be on YouTube, and you know, if you want to ask some questions there, please do. It'll be there indefinitely. And I think it's probably a good time to take another break. So we'll be back at the top of the hour. I'm really looking forward to our next presentation. And our next presenter I see is already here, Nina Weinstein. And Nina's presentation will be on listening. So it's teaching Toefl listening. So I'll just give you a quick rundown on what Nina will be covering. So listening starts with hearing the words correctly. You'll learn step-by-step techniques to teach your learners how to hear almost every word of spoken English. You'll receive a concise summary of the three main differences between spoken and written English, plus supporting practice materials. So we'll list the main Toefl listening types, the typical vocabulary for each, and sample questions and answers, as well as finding the best preparation material. So if you're familiar with Nina's work, What Do You Say is a little bit of a, well, no, I wouldn't say a little bit of a, it's a major teaching listening classic. And I'm really looking forward to Nina's presentation. So see you at the top of the hour. And Guy, thanks again.
Thank you, Phil. Goodbye.